Maya Washington's perfectly manicured hand gripped her boarding pass as the flight attendant's cold stare bore through her. "I believe you're in the wrong section," he said loudly enough for neighboring passengers to hear. The first-class cabin fell silent as all eyes turned to watch the confrontation unfold. Before we dive deeper into this shocking story, let me know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever witnessed or experienced discrimination while traveling. Now, let's find out what happened next in this unbelievable encounter. Maya Washington had built Horizon Technologies from a small startup in her garage to a multi-million-dollar tech company over 15 grueling years. At 42, she carried herself with the quiet confidence that came from overcoming countless obstacles in an industry dominated by men who rarely looked like her. This morning had begun like many others, an early alarm, a quick workout, and a review of quarterly projections before heading to Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport. The difference today was the monumental $50 million deal she had secured yesterday with Greenfield Enterprises after months of negotiations, the largest contract in her company's history. Maya had chosen comfort over corporate attire for the 5-hour flight to San Francisco. Her dark wash jeans, simple white blouse, and minimal makeup were a far cry from the tailored suits she typically wore to board meetings. Her natural hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and her only accessories were a pair of small diamond studs, a gift to herself after her first $1 million year, and a simple watch that had belonged to her father. "Window or aisle?" the check-in agent had asked without looking up from the computer. "Window, please," Maya replied, sliding her ID and platinum credit card across the counter. The agent glanced at the ID, then up at Maya, then back at the ID again. There was that momentary flicker of surprise that Maya had grown accustomed to throughout her career. The slight widening of eyes that said, "You're not who I expected." "First class is boarding through gate A12, the agent said, her tone now noticeably more professional as she handed Maya her boarding pass. As Maya made her way through the airport, she mentally rehearsed her presentation for tomorrow's board meeting. The Greenfield deal would expand Horizon's reach into sustainable technology markets, potentially doubling their revenue within 3 years. Her team had worked around the clock to finalize the details, and now it was her job to convince the board that this new direction aligned perfectly with their company vision. The boarding process began smoothly enough. Maya stood in the priority line, scrolling through emails on her phone as the gate agent called for first-class passengers. When she approached the podium and scanned her boarding pass, the agent smiled mechanically and gestured toward the jet bridge. The subtle microaggressions began as soon as she stepped onto the plane. A businessman in an expensive suit did a double-take as she approached the first-class cabin. An older woman clutched her handbag a little tighter as Maya passed by. Small actions, nearly imperceptible to anyone who hadn't experienced them hundreds of times before. Flight attendant Brendan Reed, a tall man with meticulously styled blonde hair and a practiced smile, stood at the entrance to the first-class cabin. His smile faltered slightly as Maya approached. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said, stepping partially in front of her. "Economy boarding hasn't started yet. If you could just wait in the main cabin boarding line." Maya took a deep breath. This wasn't the first time, and she knew it wouldn't be the last. She held up her boarding pass. "I'm in first class. Seat 3A. Brendan's eyes narrowed slightly as he glanced at the boarding pass, then back at Maya. "Oh, I see. Let me double-check that for you." He took the boarding pass from her hand, examining it with unnecessary scrutiny while a white male passenger behind Maya was welcomed aboard with nothing more than a cursory glance at his documentation. "Everything appears to be in order," Brendan finally said, returning her boarding pass with visible reluctance. "Though you might be more comfortable in our main cabin, where your people usually sit." Maya felt a familiar heat rising in her chest but kept her expression neutral. 15 years as a black woman CEO had taught her to pick her battles carefully. Making a scene before an important board meeting wasn't worth the emotional toll. She found her window seat in the third row and stored her carry-on in the overhead compartment. As she settled in, she noticed a white executive in his 50s watching the interaction from across the aisle. Walter Griffin, according to the tag on his briefcase, wore an expression that Maya couldn't quite read, curiosity, perhaps, or something else entirely. The confined space of an airplane always intensified these dynamics. There was no escape, nowhere to retreat when confronted with prejudice. The recycled air seemed to concentrate the tension, the forced proximity highlighting societal divisions that many preferred to ignore. As Maya connected her phone to the in-flight Wi-Fi to send a few last-minute emails, memories surfaced of similar incidents throughout her career. The potential client who had insisted on speaking with the actual CEO when she walked into the meeting room. The venture capitalist who had asked if she was the secretary. The countless times she'd been mistaken for support staff rather than the founder of a successful tech company. Her parents had prepared her for this reality from an early age. Her father, a factory worker with an engineer's mind who never had the opportunity to attend college, had taught her to solve problems methodically. Her mother, a high school English teacher who had marched with Dr. King, had instilled in her the importance of dignity in the face of discrimination. "Never let them see you sweat, baby," her mother would say. But never let them think their behavior is acceptable either. With her Harvard MBA and 15 years of success in the tech industry, Maya had hoped that these incidents would become less frequent. Yet here she was, once again having to prove she belonged in a space reserved for privilege. The remaining first-class passengers filed in, some glancing curiously at Maya as they passed. The flight attendants bustled about, offering pre-departure beverages to everyone except her. When Maya politely requested a sparkling water, Brendan responded with a curt, "We'll get to you once we've finished serving our first-class passengers," despite the fact that she was clearly seated in the first-class cabin. Walter Griffin raised an eyebrow at this comment but said nothing, accepting his own champagne from a different flight attendant with a murmured thanks. The airplane now served as a microcosm of the world outside, a place where Maya's achievements meant nothing when measured against the color of her skin. As the final preparations for departure were underway, Maya closed her eyes briefly, centering herself. Tomorrow's board meeting was too important to let this incident derail her focus. The Greenfield deal represented not just a financial win for Horizon Technologies, but a step forward in their mission to create more sustainable tech solutions. She would handle this situation as she had handled countless others, with grace, dignity, and an unwavering sense of her own worth. What she didn't know was that this particular flight would test those qualities more than any boardroom ever had. The seatbelt sign illuminated with a soft ding as the captain announced a 30-minute delay due to air traffic control. Maya used the opportunity to review her presentation notes, deliberately ignoring the continuing slights from the cabin crew. Brendan had yet to acknowledge her request for water, though he'd refilled the drinks of 3 other passengers in her row. "Excuse me," Maya said as he passed by again, her tone professional but firm. "I asked for sparkling water earlier. Could I get that now, please?" Brendan paused, his customer service smile not quite reaching his eyes. "Of course. Though, again, you might be more comfortable in economy. I'm sure we could find you a seat back there if you prefer." A muscle twitched in Maya's jaw. "I'm perfectly comfortable right here, in the seat I paid for," she replied evenly. "Just the water, thank you." As Brendan walked away with obvious reluctance, Maya noticed several passengers watching the interaction. Most quickly averted their eyes when she glanced their way, but a few continued staring with undisguised curiosity or disdain. A senior flight attendant with a nameplate reading "Jessica Miller" approached Maya's seat a few minutes later, not with water, but with a concerned expression that seemed practiced rather than genuine. "Ma'am, there seems to be some confusion about your seating assignment," Jessica said, her voice hushed but still audible to nearby passengers. "Could I see your boarding pass again?" Maya had been through this routine before. With deliberate slowness, she retrieved her boarding pass from her purse and handed it to the flight attendant. "Seat 3A, Maya stated calmly. "First class. Where I'm currently sitting." Jessica examined the boarding pass with the same unnecessary scrutiny Brendan had shown earlier. This does say 3A, she admitted reluctantly. But there must be some mistake. This is our premium cabin, and the ticket price is. I'm well aware of the ticket price, Maya interrupted, her patience wearing thin. I paid it. With my own credit card. Which matches the ID I presented at the gate. Is there anything else you need to verify? Jessica and Brendan exchanged glances before Jessica handed back the boarding pass. They retreated to the galley area, where they began speaking in hushed tones while frequently glancing in Maya's direction. From the row behind her, Maya could hear whispered comments. How did she afford a first-class ticket? Probably using company money. Or maybe it's one of those diversity programs airlines do now. Each word was like a small cut, stinging but familiar. Maya maintained her composure, focusing on the presentation on her tablet. The Greenfield deal was too important to let this incident derail her concentration. The delay announcement was updated to 45 minutes due to weather conditions. Maya attempted to call her assistant to check on some last-minute details for tomorrow's meeting but was immediately intercepted by Brendan. All electronic devices need to be in airplane mode now, ma'am, he said sharply. Maya glanced pointedly at the businessman across the aisle who was actively talking on his phone. It seems that rule isn't being applied to everyone. Brendan ignored her comment and moved on without addressing the other passenger. A woman in her 30s with carefully highlighted hair and a tennis bracelet, seated across the aisle and one row back, spoke up. The flight attendants have a difficult job maintaining order, she said loudly enough for everyone to hear. Some people just don't understand proper etiquette in first class. The woman, whose designer handbag occupied the empty seat next to her, locked eyes with Maya briefly before turning away with a smug expression. Her nameplate on her laptop case read, Amanda Peters. Maya's internal struggle intensified. She'd built her career navigating spaces that weren't designed for her, maintaining professionalism in the face of prejudice. But there was a fine line between dignified restraint and allowing disrespect to continue unchallenged. The tension in the cabin escalated when Captain Richard Donnelly emerged from the cockpit, his authoritative presence immediately commanding attention. He conferred briefly with Jessica, who gestured subtly toward Maya. The captain approached her seat with a stern expression. Ma'am, I understand there's a situation regarding your seating assignment, he said, his tone suggesting this was a serious matter requiring his intervention. Maya straightened in her seat. The only situation is that your crew seems to have difficulty believing I belong in first class despite my valid boarding pass. Captain Donnelly frowned slightly. For security purposes, could I see your ID, please? Maya looked around the cabin pointedly. Are you asking all passengers for identification, or just me? Ma'am, I'm simply trying to resolve. What you're doing, Maya interrupted, her voice calm but carrying throughout the now silent cabin, is singling me out based on how I look. I've shown my boarding pass twice already. No other passenger has been subjected to this level of scrutiny. Captain Donnelly's expression hardened. If you can't comply with crew instructions, we may need to. To what? Maya asked. Remove me from a flight for sitting in the seat I paid for. For requesting the same service other passengers are receiving without question. Please, explain exactly what protocol I've violated. The confrontation had reached a critical point. Other passengers shifted uncomfortably in their seats, some pretending not to listen while others watched with undisguised interest. The power dynamics were clear, the white male authority figure standing over the seated black woman, backed by his predominantly white crew, with mostly white passengers as witnesses. Maya knew this moment all too well. It was the same dynamic she'd faced in countless boardrooms, investor meetings, and industry conferences. But this time, the stakes seemed both smaller and larger simultaneously, a simple airplane seat versus a public humiliation that could potentially go viral in today's connected world. As she sat there, maintaining eye contact with the captain while her heart pounded in her chest, Maya thought of her parents and their sacrifices to put her through college. She thought of her employees who looked to her as a role model. She thought of every black woman who had ever been made to feel she didn't belong in a space she had rightfully earned. The confrontation had escalated far beyond a simple seating misunderstanding. It had become yet another battlefield in the ongoing struggle for dignity and equal treatment. And Maya Washington, CEO of Horizon Technologies, found herself once again on the front lines, armed with nothing but her boarding pass and an unwavering belief in her right to be treated with respect. The tension in the cabin was palpable as everyone waited to see what would happen next. What no one expected was the intervention that was about to change the entire dynamic of the confrontation. "Excuse me." The clear, authoritative voice came from across the aisle. An elderly white woman with a silver bob and wire-rimmed glasses had set aside her book and was now fixing the captain with a steady gaze. "I've been observing this situation since boarding began," she continued, "and I must say I'm disturbed by what I'm seeing." The woman stood up, revealing her petite frame dressed in a simple but elegant navy pantsuit. "I'm Dr. Elaine Foster, Professor Emeritus of Sociology at Berkeley. And what I'm witnessing is a textbook example of racial profiling and discriminatory treatment." Captain Donnelly turned to her, clearly surprised by this unexpected intervention. "Ma'am, I assure you this is a routine security." "There is nothing routine about repeatedly questioning one passenger's right to be here while ignoring others," Dr. Foster interrupted. "I've been flying first class on this airline for 30 years, and I have never once been asked to re-verify my identity after boarding. Not once." Maya watched with carefully concealed astonishment as the elderly professor continued. "In 1965, I marched from Selma to Montgomery," Dr. Foster stated, her voice carrying through the cabin. "I've seen discrimination in many forms throughout my life, and I recognize it when I see it. What's happening here is unacceptable." A ripple of murmurs spread through the cabin as passengers processed this development. Some looked uncomfortable, others intrigued, and a few nodded in agreement. Then, from the other side of the aisle, another voice joined in. "I'd like to add something here." It was Walter Griffin, the executive who had been watching the situation unfold. He stood, straightening his tailored suit jacket. Walter Griffin, CEO of Griffin Investments, he introduced himself with the casual confidence of someone accustomed to respect. "I'm familiar with Horizon Technologies and its impressive growth over the past decade. If I'm not mistaken," he said, turning to Maya with a respectful nod, "you must be Maya Washington." Maya inclined her head slightly but remained silent, watching this unexpected scenario play out. "Ms. Washington's company recently closed a groundbreaking deal with Greenfield Enterprises that's been the talk of the industry," Walter continued, addressing the captain directly. "The technology her team has developed is revolutionizing sustainable energy storage. My firm has been considering an investment partnership for months." The atmosphere in the cabin shifted perceptibly. Jessica and Brendan exchanged alarmed glances as they began to realize their mistake. Other passengers were now looking at Maya with new interest, some quickly searching Horizon Technologies and Maya Washington on their phones. "I believe," Walter continued smoothly, "that Ms. Washington deserves not just the seat she paid for, but the same courtesy and respect afforded to every other passenger in this cabin." More passengers were beginning to notice the unfair treatment. A middle-aged black couple seated in the last row of first class had been watching silently, their expressions reflecting a familiar resignation. Now, the woman leaned forward. "We've been noticing the different treatment since boarding," she said. "It's not right." Captain Donnelly found himself suddenly outnumbered, the power dynamic shifting before his eyes. The flight attendants had moved into defensive postures, with Brendan nervously adjusting his tie and Jessica quickly plastering on a customer service smile. "There seems to have been a misunderstanding," Jessica said, her voice overly bright. "Of course Ms. Washington is welcome in first class. We simply had a system error with the seat assignments." "No," Maya said, finally breaking her silence. Her voice was calm but carried an undercurrent of steel that commanded attention. "There was no system error. There was an assumption made based on the color of my skin. An assumption that I couldn't possibly belong in this cabin unless there was some mistake. She looked directly at Jessica, then Brendan, then the captain. This happens to black professionals every day. We're questioned, scrutinized, and made to prove ourselves in ways our white colleagues never experience. Most of the time, we stay quiet and deal with it because making a scene could cost us opportunities or even safety. But that silence comes at a price. It allows this behavior to continue unchallenged. The cabin had fallen completely silent, every passenger now invested in the unfolding drama. Even Amanda Peters, who had been so vocal in her support of the crew earlier, was watching with an expression that mingled discomfort with dawning awareness. The standoff was interrupted by the announcement that takeoff would be delayed by another 20 minutes due to weather conditions. The captain, clearly eager to extricate himself from the situation, nodded stiffly. "We apologize for any misunderstanding," he said, not quite meeting Maya's eyes. "If you'll excuse me, I need to return to the cockpit to prepare for departure." As he turned to leave, he added over his shoulder, "Perhaps you might be more comfortable taking a different flight, Ms. Washington. I'd be happy to arrange that for you." It was a final attempt to regain control, to reframe Maya as the problem that needed to be removed rather than addressing the discrimination she'd faced. "I will not be taking another flight," Maya responded, her voice unwavering. "I have a board meeting tomorrow that I intend to attend. What I would like is to be treated with the same respect as every other passenger for the remainder of this journey." A young man in his 20s, seated at the window across from Maya, had been quietly recording parts of the interaction on his phone. "I'm Tyler Johnson," he said, leaning forward. "I'm a social media manager, and honestly, people need to see this. Would you mind if I shared this? It might help others recognize what's happening in situations like these." Maya considered for a moment. She had always been private, preferring to let her work speak for itself rather than seeking publicity. But perhaps this was an opportunity to shine light on experiences that too often remained in the shadows. Before she could respond, Dr. Foster spoke again. "You know, I've spent my career documenting social injustice. What we're witnessing here is not an isolated incident, it's a manifestation of systemic biases that persist despite laws against discrimination." Walter Griffin nodded in agreement. "In business, we talk about diversity and inclusion, but moments like these reveal how much work remains to be done. My own industry, finance, has abysmal representation of black professionals, especially black women." The conversation was evolving, expanding beyond Maya's individual experience to address larger societal issues. Passengers who had been silent observers were now engaged, some sharing their own experiences with discrimination while others listened with newfound awareness. Maya found herself at the center of an impromptu dialogue about race and privilege, all while sitting in the first-class cabin of a delayed flight. The irony wasn't lost on her. This space that had initially been hostile was now becoming a forum for the very conversations many worked so hard to avoid. As the unexpected alliance of supporters continued to speak up around her, Maya felt a complex mix of emotions: gratitude for the solidarity, frustration that it was needed in the first place, and a cautious hope that perhaps this incident could become more than just another exhausting example of prejudice. What none of them realized was that Tyler's recording was already beginning to circulate online, about to thrust Maya's private humiliation onto a much larger stage. "Wait a minute," came a voice from the row behind Maya. A woman in her 30s lowered her tablet and looked up with widened eyes. "You're Maya Washington. I just read an article about you in Business Forward last month. You were on the cover." The passenger quickly turned her tablet around, displaying a digital magazine cover featuring Maya in a powerful stance, arms crossed, with the headline, "The Future is Here, How Maya Washington is Transforming Tech." Like a wave, recognition began to spread throughout the first-class cabin. Passengers who had been pointedly ignoring Maya or watching the confrontation with detached interest suddenly straightened in their seats, their expressions transforming from indifference to interest to embarrassment. "My daughter did a report on you for her Women in STEM project," said another passenger, a man in his 40s who had been silent until now. "Your story of building Horizon from scratch is incredible." The atmosphere in the cabin underwent a seismic shift. Jessica, who had been hovering nervously at the edges of the confrontation, approached Maya's seat with a completely different demeanor. "Ms. Washington, please accept our sincerest apologies for the misunderstanding," she said, her voice honey-sweet. "Can I offer you a complimentary champagne? Or perhaps a premium meal from our exclusive first-class menu?" Maya regarded her steadily. "What I want isn't special treatment now that you know who I am. What I want is the same respect you give to every passenger, regardless of who they are or what they look like." Jessica faltered, her practiced customer service smile slipping slightly. "Of course, that's what we strive for with all our passengers." "Do you, though?" Maya asked quietly. "Because that's not what I've experienced today. And I suspect it's not what many people who look like me experience when they fly with your airline." The social media buzz was already building. Tyler, the passenger who had been recording, was now fielding messages on his phone. Ms. Washington," he said hesitantly. "My clip is getting shared. A lot. It's already been retweeted thousands of times with the hashtag #CEOingFirstClass. Have you ever been in a situation where you were judged based on your appearance rather than your abilities? Comment number 1 if you've experienced discrimination while traveling. Hit that like button if you believe everyone deserves equal respect regardless of how they look. And subscribe if you want to see more stories about people breaking barriers and standing up for what's right. How would you have responded in Maya's position? Would you have stayed quiet to avoid conflict, or spoken up like she did? The real power shift is just beginning, and you won't believe what happens when the airline's corporate office gets involved. Brendan, now visibly uncomfortable, approached with the sparkling water Maya had requested nearly an hour ago. "Your beverage, ma'am," he said, carefully placing it on her armrest. "Again, we apologize for the misunderstanding." "It wasn't a misunderstanding," Maya corrected him, her voice level but firm. "A misunderstanding implies confusion on both sides. What happened was an assumption based on racial bias. Let's call it what it is." Brendan's face flushed red. "I assure you, I'm not racist. Some of my closest colleagues are black." Dr. Foster gave a small, knowing sigh at this familiar defense. "Having black colleagues doesn't prevent racial bias," Maya explained calmly. "These biases are often unconscious, ingrained by society. The problem isn't that you're a terrible person. The problem is that when these biases affect how you treat people, you're unwilling to acknowledge it and learn from it." Word had reached the airline's corporate office during the extended delay. The captain emerged from the cockpit again, this time with a very different approach. "Ms. Washington," he said, his tone respectful, "I've just spoken with our regional director. They want to extend their deepest apologies for your experience today and assure you that this doesn't reflect our company values." Maya nodded, accepting but not absolving. "I appreciate that. I hope this incident leads to meaningful changes in how your staff is trained." Social media was ablaze with commentary. Tyler showed Maya his phone, where the video had now been viewed hundreds of thousands of times. The responses ranged from outrage on her behalf to sadly similar stories from other black professionals. Amanda Peters, who had earlier complained about Maya's presence, now seemed desperate to reposition herself. "I want to clarify that my earlier comments weren't about race at all," she said, leaning across the aisle. "I simply believe in maintaining certain standards in first class. For everyone," she added quickly. Maya merely raised an eyebrow in response. Walter Griffin used the opportunity to move to the empty seat next to Maya. "I've been following Horizon's work in energy storage for some time," he said. "Your approach to sustainable technology is exactly the kind of innovation my firm looks to invest in. Perhaps we could discuss a potential partnership once we're on the ground." What had begun as a humiliating experience was transforming into a potential business opportunity. Maya felt a familiar sensation, the pivot from being underestimated to being valued, a transition she'd experienced countless times throughout her career. The other black passengers in the cabin were now making eye contact with Maya, exchanging subtle nods of solidarity and recognition. They understood what was happening because they had lived their own versions of this story. "You know," Dr. Foster commented, "what we're witnessing is a perfect example of how recognition can suddenly humanize someone in the eyes of those who previously dismissed them. The same people who questioned your presence are now eager to acknowledge your accomplishments." She smiled wryly. "In my research, I call this the legitimacy threshold, the moment when a marginalized person provides enough evidence of their worth that others finally grant them the basic respect that should have been theirs from the beginning." Maya nodded in understanding. "The goalposts are always moving. You have to be exceptional just to be considered adequate." "Precisely," Dr. Foster agreed. "While mediocrity is often sufficient for those who fit the expected profile of success." As the plane finally prepared for takeoff, Maya reflected on the dramatic shift that had occurred. The first-class cabin that had felt so hostile now hummed with a different energy. Some passengers seemed genuinely reflective about what they had witnessed. Others were clearly trying to distance themselves from the discriminatory treatment now that Maya's status had been established. Brendan and Jessica maintained professional service but avoided direct eye contact, their earlier confidence replaced by evident discomfort. The power dynamic had been completely reversed. Tyler approached again before taking his seat for takeoff. "The airline's social media team has put out a statement saying they're looking into the incident. They're getting hammered in the comments." Maya wasn't surprised. In the age of social media, corporate reputations could be damaged in minutes. What mattered now was how the airline would respond, with genuine accountability or empty corporate speak. As the plane finally accelerated down the runway, Maya gazed out the window at the Atlanta skyline receding below. This incident was just one of many she had faced and would continue to face. But perhaps, by refusing to remain silent, she had created a moment of reflection not just for the crew and passengers on this flight but for the thousands now following the story online. The real test would come when the plane landed in San Francisco, where Maya suspected airline executives would be waiting. How they handled the situation would reveal whether this incident would lead to meaningful change or become just another PR problem to manage. At 35,000 feet above the American heartland, Flight 1382 to San Francisco had settled into an uneasy rhythm. The seatbelt sign had been turned off, flight attendants were serving drinks and meals, and most passengers had retreated into their individual bubbles of entertainment systems and reading materials. But the atmosphere in the first-class cabin remained charged with an undercurrent of tension and heightened awareness. Maya focused intently on her tablet, refining the presentation for tomorrow's board meeting. Despite the morning's confrontation, she refused to let it derail her preparations for what could be a transformative moment for Horizon Technologies. The Greenfield partnership wasn't just about profit margins, it represented a significant step toward sustainable technology solutions that could reduce carbon emissions across multiple industries. Jessica approached Maya's seat with visible trepidation, a stark contrast to her earlier condescension. "Ms. Washington, would you prefer the grilled salmon or the beef tenderloin for your meal?" "The salmon, please," Maya replied without looking up from her work. "Of course. And may I refresh your sparkling water?" "That would be fine. Thank you." The overly solicitous service was almost as uncomfortable as the previous neglect. Maya had experienced this pendulum swing before, from being ignored to being treated with exaggerated deference once her status was recognized. Neither approach acknowledged her basic humanity, both were reactions to perceptions rather than genuine interactions. Around the cabin, the dynamics had shifted dramatically. Several passengers who had studiously avoided eye contact earlier were now finding reasons to smile in her direction or attempt small talk. Others seemed embarrassed, burying themselves in books or movies to avoid confronting their silent complicity in what had transpired. Amanda Peters, who had been so vocal in her disapproval before, was now pretending to be deeply engrossed in a magazine, though Maya noticed she hadn't turned a page in 20 minutes. Dr. Elaine Foster moved from her seat to the empty one beside Maya, carrying her cup of tea carefully. "Mind if I join you for a bit? These long flights are always more pleasant with good conversation." Maya welcomed the company, setting aside her tablet. "Please do. And thank you for speaking up earlier. You didn't have to get involved. Dr. Foster waved away the thanks. I've spent too many years watching injustice from the sidelines. At my age, I've earned the right to be direct. The professor shared stories from her decades of civil rights activism, beginning with the Selma March when she was just 19 years old. We thought we were changing the world forever, she said, her eyes distant with memory. And we did change it, but not as completely or as permanently as we'd hoped. Progress isn't linear. It requires constant vigilance. Maya nodded. My mother used to say the same thing. She marched too, though she was younger. She made sure I understood that any opportunities one had were built on the sacrifices of those who came before me. Your mother sounds like a wise woman, Dr. Foster said with approval. And she raised a daughter who clearly knows her worth. Their conversation was interrupted when Walter Griffin approached from across the aisle. Pardon the intrusion, ladies. I was wondering if I might join you briefly to discuss a business matter, Ms. Washington. Dr. Foster excused herself with a knowing smile, returning to her original seat. Walter settled in beside Maya, his manner respectful but eager. I've been following Horizon's work for some time. Your renewable energy storage solutions are truly impressive, particularly the new lithium alternative your team developed. Maya studied him with calculated interest. Griffin Investments was well known in venture capital circles, with a solid reputation for backing innovative technologies. An investment partnership could accelerate Horizon's expansion plans significantly. We're proud of our team's innovations, Maya acknowledged. Though I'm surprised you're familiar with the specifics. Most of that research isn't public yet. Walter smiled. I make it my business to stay informed about promising developments in the tech sector. Particularly when they're led by executives with your track record for identifying market opportunities before the competition. Their conversation evolved into a substantive discussion of potential collaboration. Walter outlined how his firm could help Horizon scale internationally, particularly in emerging markets across Asia and Africa. Maya was impressed by his genuine understanding of her company's mission beyond mere profit potential. We could formalize discussions next week, if you're amenable, Walter suggested. My team could prepare some initial proposals for your consideration. I'd be interested in exploring the possibilities, Maya agreed. Though I should warn you, we're selective about our partnerships. Horizon's commitment to both environmental and social impact is non-negotiable. Walter nodded thoughtfully. That commitment is precisely what makes your company valuable in the long term. Short-sighted investors focus only on quarterly returns. I'm interested in building something lasting. As Walter returned to his seat with a promise to connect after landing, Maya reflected on how quickly the situation had evolved from confrontation to potential opportunity. Throughout her career, she'd learned to navigate these sudden shifts. The same prejudice that created barriers could sometimes, ironically, open doors when someone underestimated her capabilities and was subsequently forced to reevaluate. Tyler Johnson approached next, showing Maya his phone screen discreetly. The video's gone viral, he said in a hushed tone. Over 1 million views already. The airline stock price dropped 2% in the last hour. The hashtag CEO in first class was trending nationally, accompanied by thousands of stories from Black professionals sharing similar experiences of being questioned, challenged, or made to feel unwelcome in spaces they had every right to occupy. This is bigger than just what happened today, Tyler continued. People are using this moment to talk about systemic issues across industries. Your story is resonating with so many. Maya felt a familiar weight settling on her shoulders, the burden of suddenly becoming a symbol rather than simply a person trying to travel to a business meeting. Throughout her career, she'd been conscious of the thin line between her individual identity and her role as a representative of Black women in tech. Every action, every success, every failure carried implications beyond her personal experience. I never intended to become the center of a viral moment, Maya said quietly. I just wanted to fly to San Francisco without being harassed. Sometimes the most powerful statements are the ones we make by simply insisting on the respect we deserve, Tyler replied. As the flight progressed, Maya observed how the incident had affected other passengers. The black couple in the last row of first class had begun speaking more openly about their own experiences with travel discrimination. Several white passengers were listening attentively, some expressing genuine surprise at the pervasiveness of these experiences. One passenger, a middle-aged white woman who introduced herself as a corporate diversity trainer, admitted that witnessing the incident had made her reconsider some aspects of her program. We focus so much on blatant discrimination that we often overlook these smaller interactions that occur constantly. But they're not really small to the people experiencing them, are they? Brendan had been reassigned to economy service, with Jessica now handling the first-class cabin alone. Her attempts at conversation were met with polite but minimal responses from Maya, who had no interest in absolving the flight attendant's conscience with friendliness. As the plane began its descent into the San Francisco area, Maya gazed out at the iconic Golden Gate Bridge emerging through the fog. She thought about her parents, her father who had worked double shifts at the factory to pay for her first computer, her mother who had spent evenings at the kitchen table helping her apply for scholarships. They had prepared her for moments like these, teaching her to stand firm in her dignity while navigating spaces that weren't designed with her in mind. The captain's voice came over the intercom, announcing their imminent arrival at San Francisco International Airport. His tone was notably more subdued than the confident authority he had projected during the boarding confrontation. Maya's phone chimed with a notification, a message from her assistant warning that several reporters had somehow gotten wind of the incident and were planning to be at the arrival gate. The private humiliation she had experienced was about to become very public, with implications for both her personal brand and Horizon Technologies. As the plane touched down on California soil, Maya took a deep breath and prepared herself for what awaited beyond the jet bridge. The journey had been transformative in ways she never anticipated when she boarded in Atlanta. What had begun as a routine business trip had evolved into a moment that might reshape conversations about race, privilege, and belonging in corporate America. The real question now was how the airline would respond to an incident that was rapidly becoming a public relations crisis, and how Maya would balance her role as an unwitting symbol with her responsibilities as a CEO with a crucial board meeting less than 24 hours away. The seatbelt sign dinged off as Flight 1382 completed its taxi to the gate at San Francisco International Airport. Before passengers could begin the usual scramble for overhead bins, the captain's voice crackled through the cabin speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a special announcement. There will be a brief delay in deplaning. Our regional director would like to meet with certain passengers regarding an incident that occurred during boarding. We appreciate your patience and understanding." A ripple of murmurs spread through the cabin as passengers exchanged knowing glances. The first-class section, usually eager to be first off the plane, remained unusually still as everyone watched for Maya's reaction. Maya's phone had begun vibrating continuously with notifications. Her PR director had sent an urgent message, incident trending nationwide. Major news outlets picking up the story. Need to coordinate response ASAP. Her company's social media accounts were being flooded with comments, some supportive, others questioning why the CEO of a major tech firm would play the race card over a simple misunderstanding. The hashtag CEOing First Class had evolved into a broader conversation about racial profiling in corporate and commercial spaces. Tyler leaned across the aisle. "The video has over 3 million views now," he said quietly. "And someone's leaked your full name and company details to the press." Jessica approached Maya's seat, her professional demeanor now tinged with genuine anxiety. "Ms. Washington, Mr. Reynolds, our regional director for customer experience, would like to speak with you privately once we've deplaned. There's a VIP lounge that's been arranged for your convenience." Maya raised an eyebrow. "I'd prefer any conversation to happen with my PR team present. They'll be meeting me at the terminal." "Of course," Jessica replied quickly. "Whatever makes you comfortable. The airline is very concerned about your experience today and wants to make things right." Walter Griffin, who had been observing the interaction, offered Maya his business card. I meant what I said earlier about potential investment opportunities. Don't let this situation distract you, what your company is doing is too important. Dr. Foster patted Maya's hand. Remember, dear, you have every right to set the terms for how this is addressed. Don't let them minimize what happened. The plane door opened, and Maya could see several airline executives in suits waiting at the gate, their expressions a mixture of concern and damage control calculation. Beyond them, she glimpsed several people with press badges and cameras. Ms. Washington, Brendan approached hesitantly, having been called back to first class for landing. I wanted to personally apologize for my behavior earlier. I never meant to, that is, I didn't realize that I was a CEO. Maya finished for him. And that's precisely the problem. The way you treated me changed only after you learned about my status. The respectful treatment you're showing now shouldn't be reserved for people with certain titles or accomplishments. Brendan looked genuinely distressed. I'm not a racist person. I would never intentionally. Intent doesn't erase impact, Maya interrupted gently but firmly. The question isn't whether you consider yourself racist, but whether your actions and assumptions affected someone in a discriminatory way. As first-class passengers were finally invited to deplane, Maya gathered her belongings with deliberate calm. She had faced versions of this situation throughout her career, moments where her competence, her belonging, her very presence was questioned, only to be followed by backpedaling and apologies once her credentials were established. The familiar cycle was exhausting, being underestimated, proving herself, receiving surprised recognition, then beginning again in the next new environment where her achievements were unknown. The constant tax on her mental and emotional energy was one most of her white male colleagues never had to pay. As she stepped into the jet bridge, Maya's phone rang. It was Tanya Morris, her chief communications officer. Maya, I'm just outside security. This has exploded on social media. The airline stock is down nearly 4%, and they're in full crisis mode. How do you want to handle this? No statements yet, Maya decided. Let me meet with their representatives first. But have legal standing by. This isn't just about me, it's about a pattern of behavior that affects people without my platform or resources. As she emerged into the terminal, camera flashes greeted her. A man in an expensive suit rushed forward, hand extended. Ms. Washington, I'm Robert Reynolds, Regional Director for Customer Experience. On behalf of the airline, I want to express our deepest regrets for your experience today. Behind him stood a team of people with anxious expressions, clearly part of the airline's crisis management response. They had moved with remarkable speed, a telling indication of how seriously they were taking the potential PR disaster. We'd like to offer you our sincere apologies, along with a lifetime platinum status upgrade and unlimited first-class vouchers for both personal and business travel, Reynolds continued, his voice pitched low enough that the hovering journalists couldn't hear. Maya regarded him steadily. Mr. Reynolds, what happened today isn't unusual. It happens to black professionals every day on your airline and others. What makes this situation different is that it was recorded and shared, and that I happen to have a public profile. She glanced at the cameras. I'm not interested in special treatment or private compensation. I'm interested in systemic change that prevents this from happening to others who don't have my resources or platform. Reynolds's smile faltered slightly. Of course, we're committed to diversity and inclusion. Those words mean nothing without concrete actions, Maya interrupted. If your airline is serious about addressing this issue, I'd suggest a comprehensive review of your training programs, anonymous reporting systems for passengers who experience discrimination, and transparent consequences for staff who engage in biased behavior. A small crowd had gathered, with some passengers from the flight stopping to witness the exchange. Amanda Peters hovered at the edges, clearly uncomfortable as she attempted to slip past without being noticed. Ms. Peters, Maya called, stopping the woman in her tracks. You mentioned earlier that some people don't understand proper etiquette in first class. I'd be interested in hearing more about what you meant by that. Amanda flushed red, acutely aware of the attention now focused on her. That is. I wasn't referring to you specifically. I just meant that some people aren't familiar with. I wasn't trying to. It's all right, Maya said calmly. These conversations are uncomfortable. But discomfort is often where growth begins. Walter Griffin approached, having observed the exchange. Ms. Washington, my car is waiting if you'd prefer to avoid this scene. We could continue our business discussion on the way to your hotel. Before Maya could respond, her phone buzzed with an urgent notification. The board chair of Horizon Technologies had called an emergency meeting to discuss the public relations situation. The Greenfield deal, which had seemed so secure yesterday, was potentially at risk as executives expressed concern about the growing media attention. Maya felt a familiar twist in her stomach, the realization that once again, her response to discrimination could potentially affect not just her own career but the livelihoods of her employees and the future of her company. It was an additional burden that added insult to injury. Not only did she have to experience the discrimination, but she also had to manage the fallout in a way that wouldn't damage everything she had built. As reporters called out questions and cameras continued to flash, Maya made a decision. This moment, uncomfortable as it was, provided an opportunity to address issues larger than a single incident on a single flight. Mr. Reynolds, she said, her voice clear and carrying, I appreciate your airline's concern about my experience. But true accountability means acknowledging the systemic nature of these incidents and committing to meaningful change. I'd be happy to have my team work with yours on developing more effective training and accountability measures. Reynolds, realizing that cameras were capturing every word, nodded quickly. We would welcome that collaboration, Ms. Washington. Our commitment to improvement is genuine. Maya turned to address the gathered journalists directly. What happened today is not about one flight attendant or one airline. It's about the assumptions we make about who belongs in which spaces, and the unequal burden placed on people of color to constantly prove their right to be there. As she spoke, she noticed her words resonating with travelers passing through the terminal. Several black businesswomen nodded in recognition. A group of young professionals of color had stopped to listen, their expressions reflecting a painful familiarity with her experience. In that moment, Maya understood that her response to this situation would reach far beyond the confines of this airport terminal. The weight of that responsibility was substantial, but so was the opportunity to transform a humiliating experience into a platform for meaningful dialogue and potential change. With cameras still rolling, Maya Washington, CEO of Horizon Technologies, prepared to navigate yet another delicate balance between personal dignity, professional responsibility, and the larger social issues her experience had come to represent. The plane had landed, but the journey was far from over. The bright lights of television cameras formed a semicircle around Maya as she stood in the airport terminal, flanked by airline executives on one side and her hastily assembled PR team on the other. The regional director, Robert Reynolds, maintained a practiced smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, while Tanya Morris, Maya's chief communications officer, whispered rapid-fire updates on the situation's escalation. CBS News is running it on their evening broadcast. The New York Times wants an exclusive interview. Your phone line at the office is jammed with calls from every major network. What had begun as a personal humiliation had morphed into a national conversation in the span of a 5-hour flight. The trending hashtag had evolved beyond hashtag CEO in first class to include hashtag flying while black and hashtag everyday discrimination, with thousands sharing similar experiences across various industries and settings. Behind the airline representatives, Maya spotted a crisis management team huddled together, frantically typing on phones and tablets. One particularly harried woman kept glancing up at Maya with an expression that mixed awe and horror, the look of someone watching a PR disaster unfold in real time with no clear containment strategy. Ms. Washington, called out a reporter from the front of the pack, do you believe the airline's treatment of you was racially motivated? Before Maya could respond, Reynolds interjected smoothly. Our airline has a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination of any kind. This unfortunate incident appears to have been a serious misunderstanding, and were conducting a thorough investigation. That wasn't the question, Maya noted calmly, turning to address the reporter directly. And yes, I do believe racial bias played a significant role in how I was treated. The flight attendants made repeated assumptions about where I belonged based solely on my appearance. The click and whir of cameras intensified as journalists captured her direct response. Maya continued, her voice steady. What makes this incident noteworthy isn't that it happened, these experiences are painfully common for people of color. What's unusual is that it was recorded, that it happened to someone with a platform, and that others were willing to speak up. Reynolds stepped forward again, clearly attempting to regain control of the narrative. We're offering Ms. Washington our sincere apologies along with compensation for her inconvenience. I've declined any personal compensation, Maya interrupted. Instead, I've suggested the airline invest those resources in improved training and accountability systems. A murmur rippled through the gathered crowd. This deviation from the expected script, a settlement, confidentiality, and a generic corporate statement, had caught both the journalists and the airline representatives off guard. Maya's phone buzzed yet again. This time it was a message from her board chair. Emergency meeting moved up to tonight. Greenfield executives expressing concerns about public controversy. Need damage control strategy ASAP. The weight of competing responsibilities pressed down on Maya's shoulders. Her company, her employees, the groundbreaking deal she had worked so hard to secure, all were potentially at risk because she had stood up for herself against discriminatory treatment. Ms. Washington, called another reporter, has this incident affected Horizon Technologies' recent deal with Greenfield Enterprises? The question cut straight to Maya's greatest concern. Before she could formulate a response that wouldn't further alarm her board or partners, an unexpected voice spoke from behind her. If anything, this incident reaffirms Greenfield's confidence in Ms. Washington's leadership. Maya turned to see Edward Chen, Greenfield's chief strategy officer, approaching from the terminal entrance. He nodded respectfully to Maya before addressing the press. Maya Washington built a technology company that's revolutionizing sustainable energy because she doesn't back down from challenges. She leads with integrity and stands by her principles. Those are precisely the qualities that made us eager to partner with Horizon Technologies. Chen's public show of support sent an immediate ripple through the gathered crowd. The airline executives exchanged nervous glances, clearly recognizing that the power dynamic had shifted yet again. Walter Griffin, who had been observing from a short distance, stepped forward as well. Griffin Investments is currently in talks with Horizon Technologies regarding a significant international expansion initiative. Ms. Washington's handling of today's unfortunate incident only strengthens our confidence in her leadership capabilities. The support from these powerful business figures changed the tenor of the impromptu press conference. What had begun as a potential scandal was transforming into a demonstration of corporate solidarity against discrimination. Tanya Morris, seizing the momentum, addressed the gathered journalists. Ms. Washington will be giving a formal statement tomorrow morning. For now, she'll be proceeding to her previously scheduled appointments. As security personnel began creating a path through the crowd, Maya caught sight of Dr. Foster standing nearby. The elderly professor gave her a subtle nod of approval, one trailblazer acknowledging another's steps along a difficult path. Maya's phone chimed with yet another notification. This time, it was an email from her mother, who had evidently seen the viral video, "Standing tall like I taught you. Your father would be proud. Call when you can." The simple message centered Maya amid the chaos. Her parents had always emphasized that dignity wasn't something others could give or take away, it was an inherent quality to be maintained even in the face of those who failed to recognize it. As the security team escorted her toward the exit, Maya noticed Brendan, the flight attendant, standing alone at the periphery of the crowd. Their eyes met briefly, his filled with a complicated mix of embarrassment, defensiveness, and dawning realization, hers steady and clear. In that moment, Maya hoped that beyond the media spectacle and corporate damage control, some genuine reflection might occur, not just within one airline or one flight attendant, but within the countless workplaces, institutions, and public spaces where similar assumptions played out every day without cameras or viral hashtags to bring them to light. The black sedan waiting outside the terminal offered a momentary respite from the cameras and questions. As Maya settled into the back seat beside Tanya, she took her first deep breath since the confrontation had begun hours earlier. "The board is panicking," Tanya reported, already typing furiously on her tablet. "I've drafted talking points emphasizing how this incident actually demonstrates your leadership qualities, standing firm on principles, maintaining professionalism under pressure, advocating for systemic change rather than personal gain." Maya nodded, gazing out at the San Francisco skyline as the car pulled away from the curb. "Schedule calls with our major investors before the board meeting. They need to hear directly from me that Horizon remains focused on our mission and growth trajectory." "Already on it," Tanya confirmed. "And Maya?" "For what it's worth, the response on social media is overwhelmingly supportive. Your handling of this situation is resonating with people far beyond the tech industry." Maya's phone lit up with an incoming call from an unknown number. When she answered, a familiar voice greeted her. "Ms. Washington, this is Jessica Miller from today's flight. I know this may seem inappropriate, but I felt compelled to call. Watching you speak to the press just now made me realize how much I need to examine my own behavior and assumptions." The flight attendant's voice trembled slightly. "My actions today were inexcusable, and I want you to know that I'm not just sorry because of the consequences. I'm sorry because I failed to treat you with the basic respect every human deserves." The apology was unexpected, not a corporate script or damage control strategy, but a seemingly genuine acknowledgement of personal responsibility. "Thank you for calling, Jessica," Maya replied evenly. "I appreciate your willingness to reflect on what happened. The airline is offering us sensitivity training," Jessica continued. "But I'd like to do more than just check a box. Do you have any recommendations for resources that might help me better understand these issues?" The question was sincere, and Maya found herself suggesting several books and organizations that addressed unconscious bias and racial equity in professional settings. As the call ended, Maya felt a complex mix of emotions. The incident had been exhausting, humiliating, and potentially damaging to everything she had worked to build. Yet it had also created moments of unexpected connection, support, and possibly even growth, both for herself and for others involved. The sedan turned onto Market Street, navigating through the evening traffic toward the hotel where Maya would prepare for the emergency board meeting. The media frenzy would continue to swirl, but Maya Washington had navigated stormy waters before. The skills that had built Horizon Technologies from the ground up would serve her well in transforming this challenge into an opportunity for meaningful change. The boardroom of the Grand Hyatt San Francisco hummed with tension as Maya entered precisely at 8 p.m., 12 hours after the confrontation that had thrust her and Horizon Technologies into the national spotlight. 8 board members sat around the polished table, their expressions ranging from concern to curiosity to barely concealed panic. James Whitfield, the board chair, rose to greet her with a firm handshake. "Maya, I think I speak for all of us when I say today's events have been unexpected." Maya took her seat at the head of the table, maintaining the composure that had served her well throughout the day. "Unexpected, yes. But unfortunately not surprising for many professionals who look like me." The digital display on the wall showed real-time social media metrics and news coverage. The hashtag CEOing First Class had generated over 12 million impressions in less than 24 hours. Horizon Technologies stock had experienced unusual volatility, dropping sharply when the story first broke but recovering by closing bell as supportive statements from Greenfield and Griffin Investments hit the financial news. "Our primary concern is the Greenfield partnership," said Victoria Chang, the newest board member. "A $50 million deal isn't something we can afford to jeopardize over a personal incident." Maya raised an eyebrow. "Personal incident? Victoria, what happened today happens to black professionals across this country every day. The only difference is that most don't have a viral video or the platform I do." "That's precisely the point," interjected Richard Daniels, the board's most conservative voice. You do have a platform now, and how you use it affects everyone in this company. We need to minimize the controversy, accept whatever settlement the airline offers, and refocus public attention on our technology, not social justice issues. The room fell silent as all eyes turned to Maya. The familiar pressure descended, the burden of not just experiencing discrimination but being expected to manage it in a way that made others comfortable. With respect, Richard, Maya said evenly, I built this company from nothing because I refused to accept limitations others tried to place on me. Horizon Technologies exists because I didn't minimize the obstacles I faced, I transformed them into opportunities. She stood and walked to the digital display, bringing up the company's founding principles that she had written 15 years earlier in her garage startup days: innovation, integrity, impact. Our mission has always extended beyond profit margins. We develop sustainable technology solutions because we believe in creating positive impact. That same commitment to impact requires us to address injustice when we encounter it, whether in environmental practices or human interactions. The emergency meeting extended for 3 hours as they debated strategy, analyzed public reaction, and considered various response options. By the end, a clear approach had emerged, one that aligned Horizon's response to the incident with the company's core values rather than attempting to separate Maya's personal experience from her professional identity. The following morning, Maya stood at a podium in the hotel's conference center, facing a room packed with journalists from every major network and publication. Camera flashes punctuated the air as she began her statement. Yesterday, I experienced something that countless Americans face every day: assumptions made about where I belong based solely on how I look. What made my experience unique wasn't that it happened, but that it was recorded, shared, and that I have a platform to speak about it. She outlined the airline's initial response, a private apology and personal compensation offers that she had declined in favor of systemic changes. I'm pleased to announce that after productive discussions, the airline has committed to a comprehensive review of their training protocols, with input from diversity experts and affected communities. They've agreed to implement an anonymous reporting system for passengers who experience discrimination and to establish clear accountability measures for staff. The announcement generated a fresh wave of camera flashes and furious note-taking among the journalists. Additionally, Maya continued, Horizon Technologies is launching a new initiative called Equity in Action, partnering with other technology companies to address representation gaps in our industry and create more inclusive professional environments. She revealed that Walter Griffin had accelerated investment discussions, committing $30 million to support Horizon's international expansion with a specific focus on bringing sustainable technology solutions to underserved communities globally. What began as a humiliating experience has evolved into an opportunity for meaningful progress. This isn't about one person, one flight, or one company. It's about acknowledging the work still needed to create truly equitable spaces where everyone is treated with dignity regardless of appearance, title, or status. As Maya concluded her remarks, the first question came from a reporter in the front row. Ms. Washington, do you believe the airline's response is sufficient, or is this just a PR strategy to minimize damage? Meaningful change begins with acknowledgement and commitment, Maya responded thoughtfully. The true test will be in the implementation and long-term accountability. My team will be consulting on their training revisions, and will be monitoring progress over time rather than accepting empty promises. Another journalist raised her hand. Has this incident affected your company's recent partnership with Greenfield Enterprises? Edward Chen from Greenfield, who was seated in the front row, stood to address the question himself. Our partnership with Horizon Technologies has been strengthened by these events. Maya Washington's handling of this situation demonstrates precisely the leadership qualities that attracted us to Horizon in the first place: integrity, resilience, and a commitment to positive impact beyond profit. Back at the airline's headquarters, an emergency meeting of a different kind was underway. The CEO, flanked by the head of human resources and the chief diversity officer, addressed a room full of executives. The incident involving Ms. Washington has exposed significant gaps in our training and corporate culture, he acknowledged grimly. While the immediate PR crisis is being managed, we need to address the underlying issues that allowed this to happen. The diversity officer, a black woman who had been advocating for more comprehensive training for years, finally had the full attention of the C-suite. This isn't an isolated incident. Our customer feedback data shows a pattern of disparate treatment that we've been overlooking. A task force was established to implement the changes promised in the public statement, with the diversity officer given unprecedented authority and resources to lead the initiative. Brendan and Jessica, the flight attendants involved in the original incident, found themselves at the center of a disciplinary review. While termination was considered, Maya had advocated for a different approach, education and accountability rather than punishment alone. Firing them changes nothing about the system that shaped their assumptions, she had argued during discussions with airline executives. True change requires confronting biases, not just removing individuals who display them. As a result, both flight attendants were placed on temporary suspension and required to complete an intensive training program before returning to service. Jessica had already enrolled in additional diversity education courses on her own initiative, genuinely shaken by her recognition of her own biased behavior. Brendan's journey proved more complicated. Initially defensive and resentful of being labeled racist for what he insisted was a simple misunderstanding, he struggled to acknowledge how his assumptions had influenced his actions. The viral nature of the incident had made him a reluctant symbol of the very biases he denied harboring. It was an unexpected conversation with Dr. Foster that finally broke through his defenses. The professor had contacted the airline specifically to speak with the flight attendants involved, offering her perspective not as an accuser but as an educator. The hardest part about confronting bias, she told Brendan during their meeting, is accepting that good people can perpetuate harmful systems without malicious intent. Acknowledging this isn't an admission of being a terrible person, it's the beginning of becoming a better one. Meanwhile, the video captured by Tyler Johnson had become part of a documentary series on modern discrimination, contextualizing Maya's experience within a broader pattern affecting professionals of color across industries and settings. Tyler, whose social media following had grown exponentially since the incident, used his expanded platform to highlight similar stories that hadn't received the same attention. As the media cycle began to move on to other stories, the corporate responses, both from the airline and from Horizon Technologies, continued to unfold with less public scrutiny but potentially more substantive impact. The true test would be whether the commitments made during the height of the controversy would translate into lasting institutional changes once the cameras turned elsewhere. For Maya Washington, the incident had reinforced what she had always known, that her responsibilities extended beyond business metrics to include how she navigated and transformed the spaces that had not been designed with people like her in mind. The weight of that dual burden was substantial, but so was the opportunity to create ripple effects that might ease the path for those who would follow. 6 months later, Maya Washington stood at the podium of the Women in Technology Global Leadership Conference in Chicago, scanning the audience of over 2,000 attendees. The journey from that fateful flight to this moment had been transformative, not just for her personally, but for everyone touched by the ripple effects of what the media had dubbed the first-class incident. Real change, Maya began, her voice carrying through the hushed auditorium, rarely happens in dramatic, cinematic moments. It happens in the quiet decisions we make when confronted with injustice, the choice to speak up rather than remain silent, to acknowledge uncomfortable truths rather than maintain comfortable illusions, to transform obstacles into opportunities. In the front row, she spotted familiar faces: Walter Griffin, whose investment had helped Horizon Technologies expand into 7 new international markets, Edward Chen from Greenfield, whose partnership had exceeded revenue projections by 22%, and Dr. Elaine Foster, whose wisdom had provided steady guidance through the tumultuous aftermath of the viral incident. 6 months ago, I experienced something that countless professionals of color face every day: being questioned, doubted, and made to feel unwelcome in spaces where we've earned our place. What made my experience unique wasn't that it happened, but that it became visible to millions through social media. On the screens behind her, images appeared, not of the confrontation itself, but of what had emerged from it. The airline's new comprehensive training program, developed with input from diversity experts including Maya's team. The anonymous reporting system that had already documented and addressed hundreds of incidents that might otherwise have gone unacknowledged. The industry roundtable that had brought together transportation companies to establish best practices for equitable customer service. The easy response would have been accepting a private apology and personal compensation, allowing the incident to be categorized as an isolated misunderstanding rather than a symptom of systemic issues. The harder path was insisting on institutional changes that would benefit those without my platform or resources. Maya highlighted how Horizon Technologies had expanded with Walter's investment, creating 300 new jobs while maintaining their commitment to building a diverse workforce at all levels. The Greenfield Partnership had successfully launched their sustainable energy storage solutions in markets where traditional power infrastructure was unreliable, providing clean electricity to communities that had been chronically underserved. Leadership isn't just about achieving business metrics. It's about recognizing the responsibility that comes with influence, the opportunity to reshape spaces that weren't designed with everyone in mind. In the audience, she noticed Brendan, the flight attendant whose assumptions had triggered the original confrontation. After completing his suspension and required training, he had made the surprising decision to become an internal advocate for the airline's new diversity initiatives, sharing his personal journey from defensiveness to understanding with colleagues across the company. Jessica Miller had gone even further, returning to school part-time to pursue a degree in organizational psychology with a focus on workplace equity. She now consulted with the airline's training department, helping to develop scenarios based on real passenger experiences. The airline itself had experienced a significant transformation. Initial concerns about financial repercussions had given way to recognition of a business opportunity. Positioning themselves as industry leaders in equitable customer service had actually strengthened their brand among younger, socially conscious travelers. Their stock price, after the initial volatility, had stabilized at 7% above pre-incident levels. Transformation rarely follows a straight line, Maya continued. The same incident that threatened our Greenfield partnership ultimately strengthened it. The public attention that initially alarmed our board created opportunities for meaningful dialogue across industries. The confrontation that began as a humiliating experience became a catalyst for systemic change. She shared how the #CEOinFirstClass hashtag had evolved into a broader movement, with professionals of color documenting similar experiences across industries and settings. These collected testimonies had been compiled into research studies, training materials, and policy recommendations that were being implemented in companies nationwide. Tyler Johnson, whose recording had initiated the viral spread, had launched a successful digital media company focused on documenting and contextualizing everyday discrimination. His documentary series, Invisible Barriers, had won critical acclaim for its nuanced exploration of how subtle biases created cumulative disadvantages for marginalized groups. As Maya concluded her keynote address, she spotted a young black girl, perhaps 12 or 13, sitting with her mother in the middle section of the auditorium. The girl was watching with rapt attention, occasionally whispering excited comments to her mother. After the presentation, as Maya greeted attendees in the reception area, the young girl approached with nervous determination. "Ms. Washington. My name is Zoe. I did my school project on you and Horizon Technologies." She clutched a notebook emblazoned with the company's logo. "I want to be a CEO too someday. My mom says what happened to you on that plane happens to her all the time, but most people don't believe it's real." Maya knelt slightly to meet the girl's eyes. "It is very real, Zoe. But so is your potential to change it. Every space you enter that wasn't designed for you, you transform for those who'll come after you." As Zoe beamed with newfound determination, Maya was reminded of her own childhood dreams and the mentors who had assured her that her aspirations were valid despite the obstacles she would face. Later that evening, Maya hosted a dinner for the young women in her mentorship program, 15 rising stars from diverse backgrounds who showed exceptional promise in technology and leadership. As they shared their experiences, challenges, and triumphs, Maya recognized that this was perhaps the most meaningful transformation of all, the ripple effect of inspiration and possibility flowing to the next generation. The incident that had begun as a humiliating confrontation had evolved into something far more significant, a visible demonstration of how individual dignity could catalyze institutional change when supported by strategic action and principled leadership. For Maya Washington, CEO of Horizon Technologies, the journey continued. There would be other flights, other boardrooms, other spaces where her presence might be questioned. But each challenge strengthened her resolve to transform not just technology, but the very environments in which that technology was created and implemented. The first-class cabin had been just one small battlefield in a much larger struggle for equity and belonging. The true transformation lay not in winning that single confrontation, but in changing the systems that made such confrontations necessary in the first place. Have you ever witnessed or experienced a moment like Maya's that changed your perspective? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more content that explores important social issues through compelling narratives. Remember, transformation often begins with someone brave enough to stand up and say, "This isn't right," whether that's in a first-class cabin or anywhere else. People are judged by appearance rather than ability. Thank you for joining me for this journey, and I look forward to sharing more stories that inspire change and understanding. Don't forget to share this video with someone who might need to hear this message today. Maya Washington's journey through discrimination to transformation teaches us several powerful lessons. First, dignity is non-negotiable. It's something we maintain within ourselves, not something others can grant or take away. Second, true change requires both individual courage and collective action. When Dr. Foster and Walter Griffin spoke up, they demonstrated the critical role allies play in confronting injustice. The story also highlights how discrimination often masquerades as misunderstandings until challenged. Maya's refusal to accept private compensation in favor of systemic changes shows that meaningful progress requires addressing root causes rather than symptoms. Perhaps most importantly, the ripple effects of standing firm in one's truth extend far beyond the immediate moment. Maya's stand not only transformed airline policies but inspired countless others, from Jessica's personal growth to young Zoe's newfound determination. The first-class cabin became a microcosm of society, revealing how quickly perceptions shift when status is recognized, but true equity means respecting everyone's humanity regardless of titles or accomplishments. Has there ever been a moment when you witnessed discrimination but weren't sure how to respond? Share your experience in the comments below. Your story might help others find their voice in similar situations. If Maya's journey resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more powerful narratives that explore social justice issues through compelling storytelling. Remember, transformation begins with awareness. By sharing this video with others, you're helping build a community committed to recognizing and addressing bias in all its forms. Thank you for joining us on this journey toward a more equitable world, where everyone is treated with dignity regardless of how they look or where they sit.